Perhaps one of the most popular uses of Illustrator for architectural visualizations would be in the use for creating floor plans. Now, Illustrator will open DWG files natively. So if I choose to open, let's say, the presentation, the 2D floor plans, you will notice that the DWG files will come up with a message saying, should we fit this to the artboard? And we're going to say yes. And there we have it. Now, right away, this should be familiar ground for anybody working in architecture. As a matter of fact, maybe we might be tempted to maybe use a architectural program to do presentation plans. But the truth is that there are a few tools for working on presentation plans that you usually will find very useful. So the first thing is, well, we're going to use just one as an example. So I'm going to get rid of these plans here. And then I'm going to select this plan and place in the middle of my drawing. Now, working like this in Illustrator is pretty similar to traditional ways of working on architectural plans. Everything is individual lines, and we can set line weights and color for each individual line that's here. So usually one would want to maybe start to clean up the drawing first, get rid of things that we don't necessarily need, and maybe you can start to put things on different layers. For example, I may want to put all of this furniture on one layer. So I would create a new layer here and call this furniture. And I would just right click and say send to current layer. And I can always just turn that off. Now, the next thing that we probably will do with floor plans is try to normalize the multiple line weights that we see. So perhaps the easiest way to do that is to just select everything and just say, hey, just let this be one stroke thickness. So let's try 0.5. There we go. Now, another tool that is perhaps underrated in SketchUp is in Illustrator is the Live Paint Bucket tool. And what this does, you can find it as a sub tool under the gradient tool. In my version of Illustrator, I have taken that out and have it separately. This is what it looks like. Now, the idea for this is that you first want to select all your objects and then click the Live Paint Bucket. And when you hover over any line, you will get this red message that says click to make a live paint group. Now, once this is a live paint group, we are able to, let's say, for example, we let's go to earth tones, and we want to start filling these walls with different colors. So we could actually start doing that by just using the Live Paint Bucket and filling these walls here. So it works just like any typical paint bucket, but the difference is that it works with vector lines. So it's based on the line work, so it's a lot cleaner. Now, another interesting tool that we could use is start to combine some of the things that we learned earlier. So, for example, when it comes to putting texture down on a floor plan, we could use the mask tool to have it shape in the shape of the different rooms. So for example, if I should go to some textures, and let's look at the carpet texture here, or a floor plan texture here, we could take this directly into Illustrator. But we're going to use some of the approaches that we have previously learned. Perhaps in knowing that we might have to change the tile color or adjust the tile, we could perhaps take this into Photoshop first. And while it's in Photoshop, let's convert it to a layer. And just in case we need to change the color, we could add an adjustment layer here with hue saturation. And what that allows us to do is to use the hue to browse between the colors. So maybe we want tile that might be closer to a more light pink color. There we go. And then we would save this as a PSD file, and we could call it typical tiles light yellow, since it's very light. Now back on the side of Illustrator, we can now place these tiles, and this is using the same concept we did for the section views, right? So here we go, and then we're going to place these tiles. Now we're going to resize it. And then of course you will notice that we would need to cut it out to fit. So first thing we'll do is probably put that on a layer. So we will send it to a layer and maybe call it tiles. And then let's put that layer behind. Then what we could do is, well, first let's turn on the floor plan layer and let's lock it, so that way we don't accidentally move any lines. And let's call this floor plan. And what we're going to do is we're going to go on the tiles layer, and we're going to use our pen tool to basically trace along these walls. Now the trick is that I had to lock the layer below if I intended to use it as a trace layer. If I didn't lock it, then I would be editing the layer that's below this, which is a bad thing. All right, great. Now it's there. Let's take a look on that. And we're going to use the layer mask by selecting the tile, and we're going to choose make clipping mask there. So right away, we're able to cut this to fit there. Now any kind of special texturing that I might need for any surface, I would do that texturing in Photoshop and then link the changes over. So for example, any kind of particular effects that I needed to have happen in Illustrator, Since I'm dealing with a floor plan, maybe I would prefer to stick in Illustrator and then do all my editing work in Photoshop. So for example, if I don't know, if I wanted to like have some of my tiles missing, let's say that I have this dirt map that's here, and I'm going to pull that dirt map in, and let's say that I wanted to maybe have like a few tiles that are missing and probably have dirt below them. Then I would readjust this right here. I would perhaps use a blend mode. So there we go. And right away you can see how I can get some texture by blending. Or if I didn't want it to have that effect, I could use maybe like a multiply or a overlay. Let's use the multiply. And then what would be cool is let us use some blending options here, and let's drop a inner shadow on this layer. So when the blending options come up, we could go to drop shadow, and actually we don't want a drop shadow, we want an inner shadow. And let's increase the opacity, probably increase the noise, increase the distance a little bit. There we go. And let's adjust the choke slightly. Maybe not so much. Let's adjust the size and the opacity so it's a little dark. There we go. And I guess this looks like a couple tiles are missing, and then we will just save this out. And of course, when we go to Illustrator, those changes will be reflected there. So the idea is that any texturing that I want to do, I am going to do that from Photoshop. And most of the line work that I want to do, I probably would do that from Illustrator. Now, another, I would say, important tool that is good to be used in Illustrator, especially for floor plans. And for this time around, I'm going to lock my tile layer and unlock my floor plan layer. And that is here, which is the appearance panel, right? And I'm going to undock it so we can see exactly what it does. And the appearance panel essentially allows us to layer effects on top of each other. So let's say I select the walls here, and maybe I want to add an effect. And one of those effects could be, how about a drop shadow? So we would go to stylize and then go to drop shadow. And you can already see where the shadows are showing there, and we can adjust the offset. We can adjust the blur size. And the great thing about that is that that actually remains there, so I can go back to edit that shadow at any time, or I can add additional effects. So for example, I could add an outline to this wall that's already outlined. So if I go to new outline, and let's say that I chose to add a well, a black outline. How about let's just pick a red outline just for kicks. And for this outline, I'm going to go into my stroke options here, and we're going to offset it, and we're going to make it right. Now another interesting thing is, for example, we could add a, let's add a offset effect. So we're going to go to path, and then we go to offset path. And we're going to set the offset to 10 points. And we will get a kind of confusing look when we try with the offset, but we can turn it off. Ensure that you select the object first, and we can turn it on and off, all the effects that we would want to have. So it's a really awesome thing that we're able to layer different effects together. So let's give this a try with a separate shape. So let's say that I have a new shape here, and I think I better put that on a new floor plan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drop shadow to this. So I'm going to go to Effects, Stylize, and add a drop shadow. So there we go, and we can see that the drop shadow is there and it's working just fine. Now we could add another effect here. So let's add another stroke. So I'm going to click stroke there, and this time we're going to make this stroke a different color, maybe like blue. And we're going to change the sizes. So this first stroke that's here, we're going to make that thicker. And this second stroke that's here, so you can see one stroke inside the other. Now we could add a drop shadow to the first stroke. So with the first stroke selected, to go stylize and add drop shadow. And I'm going to say OK. And we're going to need this to be a little bigger so that we can kind of see the effects a little better. So there we go. So right now we have two drop shadows on top of each other. So let's reduce that there. Let's put that to 0.5 and maybe 0.5. And then we're going to make the bottom stroke a bit bigger. There we go. And the top stroke, we're going to make that a little bigger. And the drop shadow for the top stroke, let's see if we can make that a little blurry. There we go. And let's make that bottom stroke a little bigger. So you can kind of see what's happening there. We have a bottom stroke, then we have a shadow, then we have a top stroke. So with this kind of options, we can do all sorts of things. So for example, for the top stroke, we could add another effect. So we could go here and we could add a scribble effect. but the scribble effect wouldn't work on stroke, so let's remove that there. We could change the stroke type of the top stroke from uniform to a particular shape. So we can see where the stroke starts little and then it gets big and then it gets little again. And the good thing about all of these is that these effects are actually layered, so you can turn them on and off, and you can also save these as a layer style. Now to do that, we need to access the graphic styles. And this is what this tab looks like. And how the graphic styles work is that you just need to select the object of a style that you just created and choose new style. And that's it. Now, any other object or line work. So for example, if I am just doing an ordinary line, I can just click this graphic style and then it will automatically update to that graphic style that I created over there. So things like drop shadows and those things, we can save it to our graphic style so that we can apply it again on another object. Especially for floor plans, there are a lot of options to achieve varying effects with floor plan walls using the appearance panel, so that you don't have to manually create it, but instead what you just do is create a style and then you can just add this style to a different object. So if this was the style of the wall that I created, now I can easily apply this style to any shape that I draw by just going to layer styles and clicking that. Now additionally with layer styles, so let's say that I was creating a particular type of wall. I could go into my appearance panel for this wall, and maybe in path I can add an offset path, and what that does is let me choose how much I want to offset a path. So let's say I offset a path like this, and let me duplicate that. Well, let me duplicate this path here and then offset this duplicated path in the opposite direction like that. So now I have an interesting style here with a wall style where I have two double lines here. So I can just add this as a graphic style, and then if I wanted to use this wall style somewhere else, let me delete that. So for example, if I let's lock the floor plan layer, and if I wanted to draw a wall that is here, I could just draw that and then apply this wall style. And well, in this case it definitely needs to be a bit smaller, but with this wall style I can just adjust the color and everything for it in the appearance panel that's here. Now another tip for doing floor plans is in terms of the use of furniture. Now, typically I believe most representation of furniture can be had by just getting a decent enough PNG file with transparency and just dragging that file onto your floor plan. But another tip that I would encourage is for the use of 3D programs. So for example, here in Twinmotion has a host of various types of plans. So there we go. If I needed to get particular furniture and objects, I could just search the massive library that Twinmotion has. Then I could just take a top-down view of this library. And when I take the top-down view, there we go. I just adjust the lighting so I get a nice kind of view there. And all I need to do is to save out these images. Now, Twinmotion isn't going to give me images with a transparent background, so I'm going to get it with a white background. So in this case here, I can easily drag this table right here. Now, in most cases, it may work. Let's put this on a layer on top. And once we put this layer here, we're going to bring up the transparency window here, and all we have to do is use the darken layer overlay. And what that would do for us is just give us a nice representation for the furniture directly from a 3D program. In some cases, some of us might have to take this into Photoshop to edit it, but as you can see, this came directly from Twinmotion, right? You just need to render it on a white background with some soft shadows. So for example, let me just take another example here of a bed. There we go. And let's also put that on the same layer. We're going to make that smaller. Way smaller. And we'll do the same thing again. We'll go to here and we'll go to darken. And in some cases it does work, but in others not so well. Like in this case, the darken layer overlay causes the floorboards to show on top. And when we go to multiply, it kind of does the same thing. You can kind of see the same thing happening there. So basically in this color mode, whatever is white, so you can see the white on the paper is showing through, but the brown doesn't show through, so it works. So this shortcut method may not work all the time, but ultimately you can take your images into Photoshop and remove the background, and that way you can get some nice 3D looking models from virtually any 3D application that you choose.